So today I want to pick up where we left off last on Monday. We didn't quite get finished with preparing for the closing. Okay, so I want to finish that up, but before we do that, I want to announce what we're going to be doing next week in the two foundations classes. Okay, I'm actually kind of excited about this. I was helping one of y'all this week that had questions about filling in the remine add entry dual entry form, and doing that exercise generated a million questions about what type of shingles are composition shingles. What does a composition shingle look like? What's the difference between stone countertops and solid surface countertops? How do you tell the difference between a gas hot water heater and an electric hot water heater? All of those kind of questions are things that new agents that have been doing this very long, or new homeowners, who some of you may qualify, have not encountered before. So on the class for Monday next week, we will do the normal Zoom, and we're going to go through and we're going to I'll put together a PowerPoint, and we're going to look at the different types of construction: brick front, brick three sides versus frame versus A-frame versus traditional and Mediterranean, and what's the difference between synthetic stucco and regular stucco. So we'll do all that in the quote unquote book learning on Monday. Then Thursday, in place of the Zoom class on Thursday, we're going to go on a field trip, y'all. Okay. So I'm going to find a listing somewhere close by, hopefully, assuming that the van has not departed for our new showing luxury Sprinter van. Assuming that has not departed to go for customization by then, we are going to take the new vehicle and use that as the short school bus to go to said locations. Do y'all need the short bus? I know I knew. I always rode the short bus. So, and we're going to go to a house, and there is just no substitute for eyeballs on a house. And we're going to go through and we're going to talk about terminology within a house. Is that a gable end or or a hip roof? We'll talk about all of those kind of things. So come with your questions, and we're going to have a good time next week. Okay? Sound good? All right. Having said that, we're going to very, very briefly start right back in. Was everybody here for the last one that we did on Monday? Or how much do I need to review, y'all? You weren't.
I missed one, but it's okay. You can give me a 30-second to 1 minute refresher. I don't want to keep everyone else. Sorry.
Snooze, you lose, brother.
That's fair. Not a problem.
I'm just kidding you, of course. All right, hang on. Let me get presentation mode here started. You know what? Let me share a different screen. Okay. So wow. Well, so let me just kind of very, very briefly touch base, and we'll just kind of review very, very quickly. This is what we're going to talk about, and then we're going to start talking about it. Okay, the week prior to the closing, you're going to verify that any of the repairs are completed per the amendment to address concern, and request any of the documentation, i.e. invoices and receipts that you've done for the repairs from the co-op agent. Confirm the date and time of the closing appointment and let all the parties know. You can work with the closing attorney to provide a map and directions to your client. Verify with the lender that you have clear to close, that it has been issued, Obtain the utility provider's information sheet from the seller and forward it to your buyer. And then counsel your buyer that they need to set up their utilities effective on the closing date. If you're working with a seller, you inform the seller that they have to keep their utilities on through the closing date. Okay. You're going to also, the week prior to the closing, verify the closing disclosure has been sent. So after you get the clear to close, the next question that you should be asking is, has the buyer received and signed the closing disclosure per the RESPA requirements no later than 3 days prior to the closing? What happens if you don't do this the 3 days prior to the closing?
You have to push the closing.
Roger Dodger. It's a federal requirement that it is 3 days. So if they're not signing this within 3 days, you're not closing on time. Okay. And it's not a lock. It is not an automatic necessarily that the seller is going to grant you those 3 extra days if it is not signed. Okay.
So who gets who? So he says it's been sent. We send that to the buyer?
No, the mortgage lender is going to be the one sending that to the buyer. And sometimes you're not in the loop on it. Depends on who the lender is and the quality of that lender. Some lenders work very well with agents and keep them informed of every step of the way. Some do not. So that's always a good idea to make sure your client is aware that it's coming. Warn them that it is coming and warn them that it is time critical that they turn it back around, review it, ask questions, talk to me about it before you sign it, or if you need me to review it with you before signing it, and then send it away. Okay.
So sorry if I'm holding this class up, but so this is a week prior of closing. So that's when they should send it, just 1 week, or is it like 2 weeks, or is there a certain time frame for when they should have
it? It has to be done no later than 3 days prior to the closing. Okay. So if you get clear to close, a week prior, they might sign it 7 days prior. It just depends on how the timeline is working. You know what? I'm going to show you one other thing. Hang on a second. This is something that I will post to you all. This might help you a little bit, Guggen. This is kind of a flow chart once the offer is accepted of what the buyer's agent is doing and coordinating versus what the buyer's agent is overseeing and the lender is coordinating, and what the title company / closing attorney is doing and coordinating. Okay. What you're looking for is right here at this point. And actually there's some additional steps in here. This is somewhat of an oversimplified version, but what you're looking for is right here, the loan package being assembled, submitted to underwriting for loan approval. And after the loan approval is when your client is getting that 3 days right here.
Where did you get this, by the way? Sorry.
Oh, I don't know. I've probably had it forever and I probably just found it on the interwebs.
Oh, can you send that to me? It's really good.
Yep. Well, I'm going to post it in when this gets posted to Workplace, you'll see it there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let me share back. Let me open this screen again. And okay, you back on the slide presentation? Okay, instructions to the closing attorney need to be received by the closing attorney so that they know how to process your commission confirmation, your commission. Okay, so that the commissions are correct in the closing disclosure. Okay, so the verify that the closing attorney has the loan package from the lender. Let's go right back to the slide that I just took off the screen. That is exactly what I'm talking about there. Okay. Verify that all the parties are going to be present at the closing. Is somebody going to be doing a mail away? Is the wife going to be traveling that week? And when we need to do a power of attorney for the husband, all of those things can and do take place. I'm doing a closing for a property on the 18th, and just found out yesterday that we're going to end up doing a mail away and a power of attorney. Okay, so again, the week prior to the closing, you're going to be shopping for a closing gift, right? Because you want to do that. You want to make yourself memorable to that client so that they remember you. And we've got great resources within the help desk to help everybody do that. Okay. I'm going to call this is to me, this is a phone call to your client that week prior to the closing, or in the few days prior to the closing, for setting the expectations with your client. Remember, you are going to be going to closings, hopefully 2, 3, 4 times a month for the next, however many years of your career. You've done this many times. They may have never done it before and have no idea what to expect. They don't have a vision in their head of what they're likely to be going into at a closing table. So you need to set the precedence for them and give them the expectations. You're your client's guide to this process. You want to make sure, so again, this is days prior. You want to make sure that they're looking out for that CD so they sign and return it as soon as possible. Talk to them about the final walk, what the purpose of the final walk is, and what the process looks like, and schedule it either the day of or the day prior to the closing. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about that in more detail here in a minute. You're going to explain that there's a difference between what the closing cost estimate was from the lender and the final closing cost from the closing attorney. There may be a slight difference. It's usually not significant, but there are certain things that the lender looks at that includes in their estimate that don't get included in what is the final version that the closing attorney does. Okay. Has anybody experienced this firsthand yet?
Yes.
Yes. And what was the difference? Was it significant, Trevon?
$600.
Yeah. Sometimes there's things that the closing attorney is responsible for that is not included in what the loan estimate from the lender is. Things like there may be a water bill that needs to be paid, or there may be one of the HOA fees that was not included in the original estimate from the attorney. So there can be a slight difference, and it's not a big deal. I typically will counsel my clients that if the lender tells you need to wire $10,000, I might think about wiring 10,500 or 11,000 instead of 10. Because you'll get the difference back at the closing table. Okay. Has the buyer made the appropriate arrangements to have whatever the funds are needed to close that you're getting from this estimate or the closing attorney's final estimate? Do they have those funds liquid? Have they pulled them out of their 401k and are just ready to set them in a wire transfer? Okay. And then again, because you're the guide to your client, what questions do you have about this process? Okay. Again, the week prior to the closing, in the back office, here in the office, you're working with the help desk, with Karen, and making sure that all of the tasks that are required for the clear to close or the closing disclosure to be issued are done within BrokerMint. So you can log in and verify that all the tasks have been completed. Everybody's seen one, well, hopefully everybody's seen one of these, contract to close, and each one of these should have a check mark in it or a line through it indicating that it has been completed. If not, I guarantee you, Karen is a bird dog and she'll hunt you down until you get her what she needs. and that's not to be a pain in your butt, it's to cover your butt. So if she's asking for something, turn it around and get it back to her quickly, because she is watching out for your best interest. And oh, by the way, she is the keeper of the purse. So until she has everything in compliance within your file, she is not going to issue what is called the Commission Distribution Authorization, the CDA. And everybody knows what the general term it is that is for is the pay at close. That's how you get paid. If you are not, if your file is not in compliance, guess what? You're not going to get paid. So you want to make sure you're doing that. I don't know about you, but anytime green is involved, I'm highly motivated. All right. The day prior to the closing, or maybe 1 or 2 days prior to the closing, request a copy of the ALTA from the closing attorney's office. Okay. Verify that the commissions are indeed correct, that they have followed your instructions in the instructions to the closing attorney, and that the amounts are not different than what you anticipated them to be. Who here tracks your commission religiously and knows exactly what you're going to earn on every commission, or do you all wait for Karen to tell you what it is in the CDA?
Calculate
try
mine to
to
make
get
sure that it matches.
Okay.
Yeah, I do the same.
Calculated.
I calculate and then Brokerman kind of tells you what you're going to get. So I just verify that's right.
That's true. Brokerment does do that for you. So let me give you one little piece of advice. This is completely off topic, but just editorial. Years ago, I created a spreadsheet and that calculated the commissions for me. Every time I go to a different brokerage, I just change the commission structure based off of whatever's in my independent contractor agreement. The formulas change a little bit, but I have a tracking of every single transaction I've ever done in one spreadsheet. Okay. And I use that spreadsheet to help me calculate, to be able to know what my budget is for this commission. How much am I going to reinvest? How much am I going to put in my tax account to save for Uncle Sam? How much am I going to put back into my marketing budget to market my clients? So all of that is done. And when I see a CDA or when I look at Brokerment, I'm looking at the number on Brokerment and making sure it matches with my spreadsheet. All right.
Are you able to distribute that a blank of that Excel spreadsheet?
I can if you would like. Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Yes, please.
Okay.
I made a note to ask you about it, so that's good. Thank you.
Will do. And then again, this is something that is happening in the background, and you're probably not going to need to worry about this. But if Century 21 was the holder of the earnest money, I don't know if y'all realize this. When we're the holder of the earnest money, when we have to go close, we have to get the money out of our account and getting it into the closing attorney's account. So that's part of what Karen's job is, and quite often it also involves the help desk and or Zach, because Zach will quite often run the earnest money check over to the closing attorney's office in advance of your closing. So there's a lot of steps of this process that are happening in the background that you need to be aware of. All right, so the day prior to the closing, I think this is where we left off last time. So now we're going to get into new material. Okay. The day prior to or the day of closing. Ideally, I would say the day of. If your closing is going to be in the afternoon on Friday, by golly, Friday morning, I want to do the inspection at the house. And here are some pictures to indicate why you want to do that final walk at the house. Okay, things happen, and contractually, this is the language that it tells us why we want to do that walk. The seller warrants that the time of closing the property and all items remaining with the property, if any, will be substantially the same condition as on the binding agreement date. Okay. What do you think happened when the movers arrived and the husband forgot to set the parking brake on the Ryder truck? You think your client wants to buy this house on closing date? Probably not. All right. I think I told you all this last week. I have a picture of a friend of mine that was an agent when I was a brand new agent, and he took a selfie of himself in front of a pile of ashes just like this one, and said this was my listing that burned down last night. and it was supposed to close the next day. This also happened to RIP recently. Okay, so I have a very unique situation that I'm going through right now. I have helped a client buy a home in Valdosta. It closes on the 18th. Guess what? I'm not going to be in the office on the 18th because I go to closings, and I'm not going to let my client go and buy a house that we have not walked the day before, because this kind of stuff happens. Okay. So on that final walk, what are you doing when you're performing the final walk? You want to, one, visually verify that all repairs that you have agreed to in the amendment to address concerns have indeed been done. Okay. I will print out the amendment to address concerns that says that they are, whatever items are on there. If there's 5 items on there, we're physically going to walk every single item and put a check mark next to it to verify that it has indeed been completed. The other repairs that you're going to verify, you're not going to need to verify, but there are some times when an appraiser will make the appraisal, quote unquote, what's called subject to certain repairs. And in this case, you're not going to need to verify, but you're going to want to anyway, because the appraiser has to go back and verify that any subject to repairs have been completed. Okay, physically point them out, and out each completed repair to the buyer so that they're comfortable with it. The other thing you want to bring to this is the seller's property disclosure, because you're going to go to page 7, I believe, which is the checklist of all of the items that should remain in the home. And you're literally going to walk that checklist. If the checklist says that there's supposed to be a chandelier in the dining room, better be the chandelier should be hanging there. There shouldn't be wires hanging out of the ceiling. If it says that the washer and dryer are supposed to be there, you want to make sure that that washer and dryer is there. What happens if they're not there?
Don't close.
Bingo. Yes, you're absolutely right. The closing is your leverage. And I thought I was going to this slide, but apparently I don't know my slide presentations very well. Here's perform the final walk. All of the seller's property is also removed. So you want to make sure that they haven't left any trash behind. Any personal property that was on the bill of sale is also present in the home. So if you negotiated at some point that they were going to keep the hot tub in the backyard, and that it was sold an additional amount of money on top of the things, you want to make sure that it's present. While you're there doing your final walk, it's a great time for you to take photos of your client at their front door of their new home, and use that for your marketing and your social. This was a home that I sold back in Dallas a couple years back. So don't be forgetting about your marketing ability to be able to show them happy out front of the home. Closing pictures of them with a pen in front of them, or using the fake I did it or we bought it sign in the closing attorney, it's overused. Try to do something different and unique. And at the home is the actual location is a great place to do that. Okay. And then what happens if there's a problem identified in that final walk? Obviously, your first step is notify your co-op agent, take photos of the problem, and then find a solution. This is where your skills as a problem solver and as a negotiator come into play. But remember, you have to be the calm, collected voice of reason to your client. Never let them see that, oh crap, they've left all their stuff here. Well, this is a problem. No, yeah, it's a problem. We'll find a solution. Don't worry about it. We got it covered. Worst case scenario, we'll buy some time and extend the closing date until we can get the seller out here to fix this issue. Okay. If there is no resolution that could be had prior to the scheduled closing, do not close. Okay, because does anybody know the legal term of things that are supposed to be done, not being done, and doing them after the closing? It's called survivability. If you had something that was supposed to be done prior to closing and it wasn't done and you still closed, that thing does not survive the closing unless the language specifically says so. Okay. If the seller doesn't resolve the issue, they are in breach of contract and the closing is your leverage. Absolutely, you need to use it. Okay. So at the closing, the day of the closings, buyers are not allowed to take possession or start moving in prior to the actual closing ceremony. Don't even park your car or the moving truck in the driveway unless you have prior authority to do so. But my recommendation is don't. Make sure your client is you and your client are on time for the closing appointment, and brief your client that they need to bring their ID. Sometimes they need 2 forms of ID, and I always recommend that they bring either their checkbook or their checking account information to the closing, because you never know where there might be a slight difference and they might need to stroke a check for $200 or something like that actually at the closing table. Okay, you want to set the expectation with your client that it's probably going to take about 1 hour. I have been in closings where it can be 2 to 4 hours, and it all depends on a number of different factors. The lender, who the lender is, what day of the week it is, and what day of the month it is. When do most closings take place? The Friday, the last day of the month, in most cases. And that's when lenders can be busy and they can be backlogged in reviewing the signed contracts. And just as a little piece of advice, leave the kids and the pets at home. Okay. Reading the closing disclosure and or the CD or the ALTA. How much time we got? Where are we at? I don't have much time. This might be a class for another day. There are 2 different forms. So this is the CD. This is what's going to come from it also comes from the closing attorney, but it also is a federal form. Okay. And what you see is this is only one side of the transaction. And the key that you're looking for is this number right down here, the cash needed to close. Actually, this is to the seller, so this is not coming from the buyer, but this is what they're going to earn on this particular transaction. Okay. Then there's the ALTA, which is both sides of the transaction, the seller on the left side and the buyer on the right side. And what you will typically see is what's a debit on one side of the transaction is a credit on the other side of the transaction. Here's the taxes. We've all done, remember this from pre-license. But the thing that you want to verify on here is the seller. I didn't include the entire document, so I don't even have the commission on here. But this is what is due to the seller. This is what my particular seller on this transaction walked away with. Okay, things to ensure that are correct on that ALTA. The commissions are exactly as the instructions to the closing attorney had indicated. I physically, when I'm at the closing table and they hand me the check, I'm looking at the check and I know exactly what the number is, and I will actually do the math as we're sitting there. Things that to verify, if the seller was to buy a home warranty, make sure that that home warranty expense and the invoice has been provided and it's reflected on that seller as a seller debit. Any other seller concessions, if they were supposed to, contribute $2,000 to closing costs, make sure it's on there. And also the other things on there is personal property bill of exchange, bill of sale. They want to exchange money for the hot tub or the couch that they bought or the dining room table that they didn't need after all, and your client bought it. Let me just say this: you want to exchange money when the attorney is out of the room. Why do I say that? Anybody? Is there anything wrong with it, with buying personal property on a bill of sale in the process of a transaction?
No, there's nothing wrong with it.
No, there's not. So you're not trying to hide anything, but you're also not wanting to put the attorney in a difficult position, okay? Because the attorneys, they're making you sign a document that says there's no side deal going on. It just avoids the appearance of anything that could be inappropriate. Not that it is inappropriate. Are we clear? It's just easier to handle that in the lobby outside before you go into the closing, or when the attorney leaves the room to go and have the seller's documents or the buyer's documents reviewed to the attorney and fax them off. That's when you want to do that. Okay. All right. Are we back? And at the closing, seating arrangements, buyers on one side of the table, sellers on the other, attorney typically at the end. So you've got buyers here, sellers here, this is the closing attorney, and the agents are usually sitting right next to them to be able to look at any documents and answer any questions. Okay. Outline your agenda to the client. I usually do this when we're sitting in the waiting room, or the morning that we're driving to the closing attorney. We're going to do introductions and pleasantries at the first. The attorney will the first thing that they'll do is review the CD and the Alta and talk about the numbers, and then you will start signing documents. Counsel them blue ink only. Use the attorney's pens while you're sitting there. Don't bring your own. Okay. They're going to sign all of the lender docs, and then the attorney's going to leave the room, send those docs off to the lender to make sure everything is I's are dotted, T's are crossed. And then they'll come back and they'll do some more signing of things like the title, anything that doesn't have to be approved by the lender. They'll come back and finish up the signing. And all the while they're waiting for funding. Funding is when the lender says everything has been signed, there are no missing initials or signatures. And it's okay to the lender will approve them to move money. Okay, and that's called funding. And then the attorney will bring in the final documents and the checks for you, the realtors that are in the room. You're going to exchange keys and garage door openers sometime during this meeting. And if money is to exchange hands for the personal property, do so when the attorney's out of the room. I'm restating the obvious there. Discuss any of the utilities maybe. Yep, everything should be shut off tomorrow. You know, these are just pleasantries that go along with when sellers and buyers are leaving the room together. Don't forget to take pictures for your clients. Again, for your marketing purposes, ask your clients for a review. Okay, this is critical. This is so key. I can't say this enough. Is the closing table is the happiest they're ever going to be. Okay, they are thrilled to have accomplished this hurdle, and they have not yet started the move-in process, which we all know is frustrating as hell. Okay, and they're going to be exhausted. They're going to be sweaty, nasty, ugly. They're going to be fighting. The kids are going to be screaming. There's no food in the refrigerator. You want to snag them while they're the happiest that they can possibly be, and that's before they started to move. All right. So literally tell them as you're walking out. So, hey, one of the things that really helps me in my business is an online review. Is it okay if I send you an opportunity to review? Okay. Better yet, you take out your phone and go, hey, would you mind shooting a 15-second testimonial video of your experience? Boom. And your client could go, hey, Julie was great. She helped me throughout every step of the process. We just left the closing table. Couldn't be happier. Love my new home. Thank you so much, Julie. You were awesome. Now you've got a great marketing video. Okay. And also while they're there, whether it's a seller, whether it's a buyer, hey, you're going to have opportunities to explain to your friends and family that you've just gone through this process. I would love it if you mention my name and offer my services to them. In other words, I'm asking you for referrals. Okay. Okay. After the closing, then you're going to deliver the checks back to the office as soon as possible. Invite your clients to your social media if you haven't done so already. And this is not the end of our relationship, but the beginning of our friendship. I love that line. Not the end of our relationship, but the beginning of our friendship. Set your clients up on a past client drip campaign, and an anniversary campaign. So every year on March 3rd, they're getting a reminder that, hey, we bought our house a year ago today. Okay. And anytime one of my pictures, my marketing pictures from a closed home comes up on my memories as 3 years ago, I helped Joe Schmo buy a house, by golly, I'm sharing that puppy today, and I'll share it with them and I'll tag them in it. Okay. And then also after the closing, you may want to think about, continuing the follow-up a week after the closing, find out when they're moving in, deliver a pizza and a 6-pack of their favorite beverage or a bottle of champagne for them to celebrate their first night in the house. And then stay in touch with your client, because not everybody does that very well. Okay. Apologize I went over. I hope you found it useful, productive, helpful. What questions do you have, everybody?
I have a quick question. Will we be able to see some of the listings that we're going to look at on our field trip next week?
Yeah, as soon as I figure it out, I'll let you know.
That way we can kind of get some questions ready, I guess.
Yeah, that'd be great. You can look at the pictures and then you can come with your questions. I love it. It's a good idea. Awesome.
Thank you. I'm excited.
All right, folks. Have a great day.
Bye.